I'm really excited to be introducing our first speaker for today. Her name is Beth Barz. Some of you might know her as the head coach of the Queen's Gales women's rugby team. And she's been the head coach for the past 10 years. She's been with the team for the past 13. She graduated from Queen's Phys Ed in 2000, was a player for 4 years here. She's a proud Queen's alumna, and she's an amazing coach. So to give you guys an example of some of the things that she's done and how amazing of a coach she is, in 2013, she led the Queen's women's rugby team to the first provincial banner and CIS bronze medal, which was the team's highest ever placing. Yeah. Among some of her other accomplishments, she's a level 4 certified coach and World Rugby educator who facilitates certifications in internationally and nationally recognized programs. So she is currently involved with the National Coaching Institute as a module facilitator and mentor coach for coaches. So in short, she's not only a coach of players, but a coach of coaches. So she's an outstanding coach, and I look forward to hearing everything she has to say. So welcome, and thank you.
Thank you. I have this. I don't need that. Did you turn it off? Put that over here. Thank you. Thanks for making time for me this morning. I'm sure a few of you had a late night last night, so we'll see how awake we can get you today. So I was tasked by Marianne to talk a little bit about organizational development in a volunteer context in sport, which definitely isn't hard to do in Canada. So most of our sporting events in Canada are very volunteer driven. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Queen's perspective, and hopefully offer you some opportunities to apply that to the branches that you're in or other volunteer contexts that you're in as well. Okay, so just if you haven't seen a photo of our team, this is our current team this year on Nixon Field, the brilliant field that was built for us mainly by a large donation by Gord Nixon. So this is a current team this year. You can see that this has been lovely and photoshopped because the lights aren't in the background anymore, but it really looks nice with Kingston Hall in the background. So this is this year's team. And this is a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. So I don't believe, do people have notes on this or no? Okay, so I did say there were a lot of pictures in this presentation. I don't tend to put a lot of text on slides, so feel free to take notes or interrupt or ask, and I'll ask you to do a few things as we go as well, okay? In general, I want to start with values and then sort of work our way around through to culture, because without values, we can't have culture, because we have to have something to come back to all the time. So whenever you have people in a volunteer context, they have to be all on the same page, right? And a team is generally one of the best ways you can do that. We usually have a common goal. Sometimes that goal is winning, sometimes that goal is getting together, sometimes that goal is simply being disciplined. And sometimes that goal is trying to get everyone into a bigger context than what they could maybe accomplish by themselves. My guess is that many of you as heads of your branch organizations or doing a lot of those organizing pieces sometimes feel like you're the lonely person on the island. You're the only one who's doing anything. And mobilizing all those other people to be a part of it and be a part of what your vision is very difficult. So sometimes sharing that vision and finding out about the people who you're trying to mobilize is really helpful. You can't have them help you until you can figure out how you can help them. Okay? So volunteerism in sport, this is the QWR context. This is... well, it's probably more a Twitter evolution piece because it used to be Queen's Women's Rugby and now we're QWR or hashtag QWR. How many of you are on Twitter? Whoa, look at that. Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so at Beth Barz, if you want to tweet me during the presentation, and also at Queen's Gales. So always a good thare to follow. Are you all following Queen's Gales on Twitter? Excellent, good. We like to hear that. So for QWR context, we have obviously the athletes who are volunteers, really. They're not getting paid. This is not the NCAA. And even in the NCAA, we also know down south they're trying to have the athletes get a little bit more money than what the universities are making off things like March Madness, that kind of thing. I don't think we'll see that in Canada, and I really hope we don't. Coaches are volunteers. I have a full-time job outside of coaching. I'm a teacher, and then I coach outside of out of that context. So I don't have an office on campus. I have some really awesome people that help me accomplish my goals, which is the support staff that are the paid staff at the ARC, and people that I work with on a regular basis who probably get really, really, really sick of seeing emails from me on a regular basis. But they're really fantastic. We have a little bit of a different environment than you folks do. When you engage volunteers, you're able to keep them in for a little longer than 1 to 5 years. I hope, anyway. Okay? We have a limited amount of time where we can engage volunteers because their career at Queen's is dependent on their 5 years of eligibility. Okay, so we have to try and make maximum results in a minimum amount of time. Okay, so it's a little bit different. Excuse me. Basically, we have 3 to 8 athletes in the starting lineup every year that we have to replace, which is pretty big when there's 15 athletes on the field. How many of you are familiar with rugby in general? Wow, this is awesome. Okay, so we have 15 aside rugby and we have 7 aside rugby. Next year, we're going to have 7s in the Olympics for the first time for the women and for the first time since 1924 for the men, although it was 15 aside in 1924. So that's happening in Rio. One of our former athletes is in the running to potentially be making that team for next year, Nadia Popov. I'll show you a photo of her a little bit later. Really excited for her opportunities. However, we also had to replace her when she left. That was tough. And she was a Rookie Athlete of the Year. She won the Alfie Pierce Trophy. She's not only a really amazing rugby player, but she's an awfully amazing person as well. So we have this issue where we have to replace volunteers. And if we're going to be replacing them, we have to have a pretty good reason why they might want to be involved in the first place. So I wanted to share with you a really brief little definition. You guys have probably seen this before in terms of what, why are we considering these people volunteers, these athletes volunteers, okay? They're volunteering their time or talent for a worthwhile activity, which makes sense, right? And that's what you guys are all trying to do, is get people to volunteer their time and talents for the worthwhile activity that you've identified. So we'll just highlight that. And not only that, it's willingly and without pay, right? Wouldn't it be nice to pay those volunteers? Man, you'd probably have a whole lot more people coming out. At least I think that might happen. And I guess in our context, we are able to give athletic financial awards. They are small, but they do make a big difference for our athletes who are paying their own way. And we all, how many of you are still paying off student loans? Yeah, okay, so we definitely have that piece too, right, where we need to think about the financial piece, okay? Some sport equivalents for you. As you heard earlier, my experience isn't just at Queen's, it's also within Rugby Ontario, Rugby Canada, and the National Sport Institute. So we have a lot of volunteers involved in those areas, and the context is kind of interesting. We have athletes who are volunteers, coaching staff who are the volunteer coordinators, somewhat similar to yourselves for most of you. And then we have the admin and support staff who are the paid staff that we are working with, okay? And we really need them, and at the same time, sometimes there's a disconnect, right? Because we're trying to do something and we don't get what we want, okay? But we have to make sure that we can try and make these things happen. In our equivalent, we have a QWR executive. So on our team, we have an executive group. And we have one person on that group who's the community outreach coordinator. That was something that was added a few years ago by Maren McLeod. And she started things up looking at athlete volunteerism, trying to get our athletes into the community volunteering as much as they could, okay? On top of all the hours they're putting in. So total hours put in by QWR this year, I had the girls, this was just for training, sorry, this was just a team bit, 17,600 hours. Okay, so that's in season, off season, and that's also coaches involved in that as well. Other volunteer commitments, I asked the athletes, okay, how many of you are volunteering? Where are you volunteering? How many hours do you think you're putting in? And we have 41 athletes, and they said combined approximately about 1,000 hours they're putting in on top of that volunteering, which is pretty amazing considering that they're looking at anywhere from a 15 to 25 hour week in season and an 8 to 10 hour week of training out of season. Pretty massive. So getting those guys involved is huge. So remember, the volunteers you have are probably volunteering in other places too, right? How many of you would think about that? Of the people that you're working with, how many of them are volunteering in another capacity? Coaching their kids' sports team, they're doing something else. Yeah, I see lots of nods. Okay, definitely makes a big difference. So from our perspective, here's a shot here. Marin, our rugby athlete, is on the right. And then actually on the left is a grad from my high school. She played volleyball. But this was the first year that the volunteer committee put together food baskets for Martha's Table, the soup kitchen in town. And all the baskets are in front of them. I mean, that's a massive amount of food and stuff that's being donated at Christmas. Okay, so that's one of the things that our team's involved in. A couple others. The CIBC Run for the Cure. The men's rugby team has done an amazing, incredible job over the last 10 or 15 years raising money for CIBC for breast cancer research, and our women have been doing the same thing as well. Lots of pink there. It's a little bit overwhelming, but it's nice because everything else is tricolor in this presentation. So there we are. And then this was a photo from about 2 weeks ago with the motion ball tournament, and that a lot of the varsity athletes were volunteering their time working with people with mental disabilities and putting them into basically a tournament format where they had a buddy all day. And I think our athletes got more out of it even than some of the people who were participating. So a little snapshot on no good way to use the R word during the day. And here's a little mashup of everything that our girls do through the year and all the. So the size of the word is directly linked to how many of the athletes are doing it. Which is plenty. So there's a lot of stuff up there. Go Girls is very similar to the Boys and Girls Clubs, getting people active, girls in particular, particularly in the north end of Kingston. Yes?
What was the motivation for having that outreach coordinator initially and doing, I mean, it's fantastic, but
yeah.
They're already putting in 10 to 25 hours every week for the entire year.
Yeah, it seems a little crazy, doesn't it?
Well, it is.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
They have time for the stage. But what's the motivation like, as far as the values and the engagement and all the other things?
Right.
Promoted from your perspective?
Well, I think that, the athletes are really committed to being the best they can be on and off the field as rugby student athletes. They also realize there's a life after rugby, right? We're not in it for professional careers in Canada for women particularly. There's not a lot of opportunities, and I would say that's a pretty blanket state for most female sports, unfortunately. So they recognize that their resume may not just be looked at well when it says, yeah, I was a 4-year starter or I was a 4-year player on the QWR team. That doesn't have a lot of weight in the corporate world or that kind of stuff, or potentially in other areas. It doesn't have to be corporate. So they want to look at expanding and being well-rounded. So to be able to do things together, it makes a difference. When they can get a ride together to go north end of Kingston, or the Soul Foods Initiative, the athletes are actually on Friday nights, they're taking leftover food from the cafeteria and bringing it to individuals in need. So the big thing is it's altruistic, but it's also making something about the fact that they have other places to go and other places to be after they finish here. I think it's really lovely that we've got athletes who recognize that their 4 years are going to be done and they have a bigger, longer plan once they leave here. And often, I mean, we see people engaged in all sorts of different opportunities, and they're not doing it just to be there for the opportunity. They're doing it for maybe an opportunity in the future, right? So we're trying to give them the skills that they can use. I love this kind of thing because, say, for example, the motion ball piece, we have athletes who aren't considered a captain or part of our leadership group on our team, and yet they're still being able to portray and show and learn and develop as leaders. So it's really valuable that they're getting those experiences outside of our team, and then they're going to bring it back. So there's a multitude of reasons, I suppose. And I think, to be honest, we've said the Kingston community really supports our teams. We need to support the Kingston community. And we've seen a lot of that from our admin at Queen's and the VLC committee, which is an outreach committee with all of the varsity teams connected. So there's some really good stuff happening, and I'm really excited to see, even in 3 or 4 years, kind of where it all goes. And from a coach's perspective, it's great. It's run by the athletes. I just get to sort of sit back and watch and ask them about it, whereas most of the other stuff, I'm driving it, right? So, and again, you guys can probably relate to that type of idea. Okay, so we're pretty lucky, pretty awesome.
Might be
awesome
surprised
group.
how much weight a varsity team does have on resume.
Absolutely, I think it does. I think it has more weight for men than women. Yeah, for sure. But it absolutely has a big. It has a big weight for sure. But again, playing a varsity sport and then maybe going into nursing might be something that really resonates with someone, and then maybe with somebody else who's on that hiring committee, it may not resonate as much. So again, that well-rounded kind of trait is something to really think about. So quickly, the sport context in Canada, I would say, is this. Our paid staff overworked, underpaid, more than likely. At least that's been my experience, looking at the fallout when one person leaves and things become crazy. Then we really lean on our volunteers who are overworked. And I've highlighted undervalued here at times, because I think in a volunteer capacity, we've all felt undervalued at some point. Okay, so we either value people in our society with money, or we value them by valuing their own values and creating values together. Does that make sense? We have to value their own values. So we have to understand their values in the first place. Or in some case, or some way, shape, or form, create a vision that has values that everybody can share in. Okay, so here's the question. How do we create the value as a reward for work that our athletes and coaches put in? Okay? I don't want my athletes to leave after 4 or 5 years and say, I didn't get anything out of being a member of QWR. That would be an absolute travesty on my part. I have failed as a coach if people leave and say I didn't get anything out of it. So perhaps in your own volunteer context, when you think about the people who have been a part of your team and who have left, have they gotten what they needed out of their volunteer experience with you? Think about that for a second. Then what I'd like you to do is just turn and talk to the person next to you and just briefly discuss that. Have the people in your volunteer context gotten what they needed out of the volunteer opportunity? Got about 30 seconds. Go. Could I get 1 or 2 people to share briefly about their experience or their thought about if volunteers have been able to get out of what they need out of the experience? Go ahead.
I think the one thing we really agreed on is giving people really clear responsibilities and ownership over their part of the bigger project.
Absolutely.
And if you don't clearly define what people can achieve, then some people will struggle to sort of have that impact or feel like they're bought into the process or feel like they're really being trusted and are valued.
I like the idea about the process, right? You can't just tell them what to do. You need to involve them in the process of planning of what to do and how to define the success criteria at the end of it all.
Yeah, as much as you can, the roles you define for people need to resonate with their goals and what they think they can contribute.
Yeah, where their strengths lie, for sure. Anyone else?
We talk about connections. That is, the volunteer organization has to be really welcoming of new people in so that the people feel connected, part of the group, because part of what you're doing volunteer or is not only an outward connection with the community, but also a social connection with other people inside of the organization.
Lovely. Yeah. So connection, and I would venture to throw out the word that my athletes would certainly recognize as an answer to a lot of questions I ask, which is communication, right? We can only connect if we communicate, and vice versa. So communication has to be clear and forefront. And since so much of our communication happens over email, and it's just words, excuse me, we miss a lot, right? And sometimes we get an email from a harried staff member who's just trying to get something done before the end of the day, just to get that communication out, and then the communication's not clear, or it's taken the wrong way. And we think, well, we're putting in this time, we should be getting more out of this. And yet we need to be really cognizant of the fact that maybe we're not giving what we need to give in order to be clear. Okay, lovely. Was that helpful? Little definition. Good. Couple of questions that I was sort of thinking about when I was putting this together. One, why do we participate? Why do we have people actually participate in our volunteer organization? Can anybody wrap that up in one sentence? Do you have an elevator pitch to be able to say that to somebody who might be interested in participating in your organization? How many of you could sum that up in one sentence or less? All right, we got one. George, you want to share it? Putting you on the spot. I like it. All right. I like that, Sue. You're on the spot now. I did have a volunteer, so.
Nice try, George. I don't think there is one sentence, but it is, in my opinion, an opportunity to give back to the group or organization you perhaps got something from.
Sure.
I mean, I think people want to have that connection.
Yep.
Right? You want to give back.
Absolutely. That's why I got involved in coaching in the first place, for sure. Do you want to throw one out?
Yeah, the way I try to pitch it is that you can accomplish more with other people that believe in the same things or want to accomplish the same kind of things that you do if you work with other people rather than working on your own.
Was that one sentence?
You can accomplish more with other people.
But I'm shing. Okay, I like that. Yes, please.
Piggybacking Ian's comment, but it's getting to work with great people, like just meeting them and hanging out with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would fully agree with that. Being involved with Coaching in Canada, it's amazing the community, right? Where we all feel like we're on an island at times, and then all of a sudden we get together and you can't stop talking. And it's not always about rugby. In fact, it shouldn't always be about rugby specifically. It shouldn't be about the one thing that you're there for. You need to expand that, right? Go ahead. Did you figure it out?
No, I don't. I haven't figured it, because we struggle with this. We tried to have 15-second pitches. We tried to have 60-second pitches. And it's not easy because that's what it is. It's a pitch.
Right.
It's not a conversation. You want to have a conversation. And a conversation is more than 15 seconds or 60 seconds.
What about rephrasing it as, instead of a pitch, a philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, then you can, then you, but that, well, can you put that into a sentence?
Yeah.
But you can have it.
Coaching philosophy. We have them. And that's the one thing that people want to know about when they ask about your program. It's not about all the other stuff. They want to know that you have things right for their kid, right? So I have to be able to share my coaching philosophy very quickly and very easily.
I think what, from a university council perspective, what we often talk about is the potential to make an impact. So you're not just giving back, but to your value point, which I think is excellent, is people are looking for a way to have all of that, those good connections and do it with great people and give back to their alma mater. But they really are looking at what kind of impact can they have on a place they care a lot about.
Perfect. Yeah. So values, impact, making a difference. We've got some really good buzzwords. Yes and then yes.
The only other thing, I totally agree with the comments in the buildings. The other one I think is very important is the personal and professional growth that you get involved here.
That's right.
So it's working for something you believe in. It's working with people you believe in. It's making an impact, and it's growing personally and professionally. 100%.
And I think most people who want to volunteer are into the growth idea, right?
For sure. Have it better than
Yeah.
They want to make it better
than it was when they arrived, for sure. Last comment.
The word, I think the buzzword for me is meaningful.
Meaningful? Yeah. And it's how we define meaning in our lives that allows us to have that part, for sure. So we have a couple of other questions here. I'll encourage you we'll come back to them at the end of this to do a little bit of thinking. I'm sure most of them you can at least answer on a superficial level, if not quite in depth. What I want to go to, and it sort of speaks a little bit to the point you just made here, values-based leadership. This is something that was developed probably about 30 years ago by Kouzos and Posner. They're research partners and written a couple of books, The Leadership Challenge, that kind of thing. I'm a big reader, so I apologize if I throw a few too many books at you today. This is the way that we're trying to lead. And this is something that we don't share this directly with captains, but this kind of idea, model the way, okay? Make it obvious. Do the things that you want other people to do, and then you're going to be able to create meaning for them, right? Inspire a shared vision. We have to be able to have a vision with our values, challenge the process, enable others to act, and we've got to encourage the heart. We have to have people enjoy doing what they're doing, and we have to be able to celebrate when we have successes. It's a lot easier to celebrate in a team atmosphere than a volunteer atmosphere, right? Because we just figure out, oh man, I finally got through that. I got it done. Whew, on to the next thing. Right? We don't ever say, yeah, that was awesome, congrats to me, right? Well, maybe with a glass of wine or something, but or maybe a few. But we need to do this, otherwise we are going to lose people, right? We can't keep them engaged if we don't celebrate our successes. We're going to have a real issue with that. Okay? So lots of pieces there. We have to have the intrinsic values that we set up with our team through the values-based conversation, and we have to be able to know where we're going. Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit as we sort of make our way through this. When you do this, and it comes back to you with your volunteers, kind of turning around and telling it back to you, then you know that you've made an impact. So here's a little piece that I'm going to share with you. This is by one of our athletes who graduated a few years ago. And this is the note she left on the whiteboard, part of it, not all of it. And you'll note there's a little word bleeped out of there, in the team room when she left after her last exam. And yes, she can spell, even though she was in engineering. I know it says famdamily. So the words in bold are the ones that I consider most important. Do good work. Man, if all of our athletes can leave and know that doing good work is the ultimate thing that they can do when they leave, we've accomplished the right things. And the message for those athletes that are here and are still here, how am I going to improve myself and my team today? Speaks directly to that growth point. Right? The whole idea of personal growth and growth as a team. And probably most importantly, and particularly for this group, seeing other people grow. You know, one of our athletes who's leaving us this year, sadly, came in as a red shirt and was making a transition from being a scrum half, which is like being a quarterback, to being a prop, which is like being an offensive lineman. A little bit different, okay? And she worked and worked and worked and worked, and I remember asking her, hey, how are you doing with that basic body position? Snapped right into it. That was in January of her first year, and she went on to be a starter for us in her last 3 years and made a massive impact in terms of what she was doing. But the fact that she was able to improve herself bit by bit by bit by bit meant that she also improved the team. And to see that and then actually see her leave was pretty amazing. The other piece I'm going to share with you is from another one of our grads. I mentioned this earlier. We have 2 athletes whose grandfather played for the men's team back in the day, a few years ago. And Jocelyn was one of our are our team captains, and is now actually back working with our team as a mental skills consultant. And this is what she wrote before she left. There's 2 pages. I'll let you read it. I'm always guilty of reading things for my students, but I don't think I need to do it for you. This gives me chills when I read it. Am I okay to flip this over now? So that was written a few years before we won that OUA gold medal, but it didn't matter that we didn't win it that first year. And it didn't matter that we didn't win it the second year. But the fact that we did win it the third year was almost like vindication, right? We had people who bought in, who saw value in what we were doing, and knew that once they were done with our program, they would be able to look back and say, that was a really, really reasonable use of my time, right? And I was able to grow through the experience. Okay? So volunteer values, a little bit. Again, the people in your volunteer context might be doing it for different reasons. It might be purely because they think they should volunteer, so they're going out and doing it. Not because they want to grow. Not because they're simply altruistic. Maybe because they want a different volunteer opportunity and they have to do something else first to be able to go ahead and do it. Maybe because they want to meet the bigwigs of the university. Okay? But, you know, there's all sorts of different reasons. You got to figure it out, okay? Or, if you can, inspire people, make them buy into the same set of values, okay? Which is a challenge, and sometimes can feel like you're making people drink the Kool-Aid, but may also be effective. I also coach at the high school level, and I don't make cuts. The university, unfortunately, I do have to make cuts, but the high school level, anybody who can come out can play. Which I think is really important because not everybody has an opportunity to play a sport when they're in their teen years, mainly for financial reasons. But I teach in Sydenham, north of the city. There's not as many opportunities except for soccer, which, you know, it's kind of boring. But crazy round ball sport. Okay, so we like to open it up a little bit for them. Okay, so we don't make cuts, but you know what? So many of those kids are not athletes. And they're great kids, definitely not athletic. They just want the T-shirt. They just want the T-shirt to wear around the halls and say, I am part of something bigger than myself, right? So is that part of a value too, when you think about it? Who on your team just wants the T-shirt? I mean, they're there to do work, but they may not be totally committed, right? And then I got to the point where I didn't make cuts, but I made them run the beep test, so at least they had to be fit enough to be able to get there. That scared off a few. They didn't love that part, but anyway, it is what it is. Okay, so a couple of different reasons, and not everybody can do it, right? Not everybody can be a part of your team. It's okay to say, no, you're not ready for this. Or, you know what, maybe there's a better volunteer opportunity for you. Here is not it. Come back in a few years, or, hey, let me give you a call when I have the perfect opportunity for you. Okay? Lots of other ideas, right? Because maybe they're coming to your volunteer organization because they didn't get accepted by somebody else. You ever think about that? Wasn't just because they really, 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 really wanted to get involved in your project? Okay? So think about that piece too. Why are they there? Do you want them there? And can you work with them to inspire the values that you have? Keeping them engaged. You need to provide them with opportunities, provide them with the process for being a part of the opportunity and developing it, and then work within that area. This is what we do. We try to give them as many opportunities as possible. Okay, you need to be bigger, faster, stronger. You need to be able to know more rugby. You need to be able to develop technical skills, etc. So we have strength and conditioning sessions. We have mental skill sessions because we got to get this right before we can get the rest of it right. We have lots of technical sessions. My athletes love our 6:30 in the morning sessions in the off season, especially a few of them who have a hard time getting out of bed. But we also try and give them some life opportunities, and that was where the opportunities to volunteer came out. We needed to get them outside of rugby. Rugby is not life, even though the T-shirt says it, okay? Or hockey or whatever. We have to have those other opportunities for people. What we also need to do is make sure that we plan for when our senior athletes graduate. And we do have a really fabulous bunch that are leaving us this year, like every year, and we've got to be able to fill in. So right now we're in the middle of our crazy recruiting time, talking with athletes who are interested in Queens. And you know, we're really lucky here. With the traditions we have at Queens, people are really excited to come. They show up at Nixon, they see that beautiful field, they see Kingston Hall in the background, and they go, wow, this is somewhere I want to be. And then they meet us, and then they're really not sure anymore. But in all reality, we have the recruiting, so we get people here. We know they're probably going to be a good fit. We actually have them fill out a recruiting form that talks about past successes and failures in their lives and where they see themselves in 5, 10, and 15 years. Because it's great that they're a good rugby player, but you know what? I don't want them if they haven't failed before, or at least identified some sense of failure, because most of the athletes that we coach at Queens are overachievers. Anybody else remember being an overachiever when they were here? Yeah, takes one to know one. Okay, so we have a lot of people who don't fail a whole lot until they get here, right? They find the class that kicks them in the butt. They find a housemate that they have a big conflict with. They find a professor they have maybe a conflict with as well, and they need to know how to deal with it. And they haven't failed before, so they can't. The idea of just outworking everybody else doesn't work anymore. They have to come up with another coaching strategy, or another coping strategy, sorry. Apparently I'm already going into my coach education later today. So recruiting is big, and we want to recruit the right people. Okay. We also, sorry, go ahead.
Well, are other teams or other schools across the country doing that same sort of processing and having kids write their value?
No.
So you're unique in that?
Yeah, I think so. As far as I know, no. Most coaches look at the list of provincial athletes from every province and go, hey, they're pretty good. I'm going to invite them. So, which makes sense, right? I mean, you're then dealing with a rugby IQ that's a little higher, but it's not all about rugby, right?
And
so
having the marks threshold to deal with that no one else has to deal with, really, that's good.
Yeah, we're pretty lucky. The nice thing about coaching a women's sport is most of the time the girls coming out of high school, and I know I'm generalizing and I try not to do that, but in this case it's been my experience. I've found that the women coming out of high school generally have better marks than the guys. They decided a few years earlier to develop some good habits, and the guys kind of make that decision in grade 11 and 12. And I'm also saying that because I see that every day in front of me at the high school level. Okay, so
those girls that you're recruiting have choices to go anywhere they want because they can get anywhere they want. So I was just thinking about sometimes as a volunteer organization, we don't think at times we have the luxury to present a potential volunteer with, do you mind filling out your goals and objectives and
right. Well, that's a really good point, and that's kind of where I wanted to get to is, so, we can do all this stuff because I have people who want to be a part of things, right? And eventually, and there's also people that I say no to, right? Wouldn't it be great to have that context as a volunteer organization where you say there's so many people, I'm actually turning people away? And in all reality, you can do that. Well, how do you do it? Do you have them sit down and fill out a recruit form? No. It's the communication piece and the connection piece that we talked about. Okay? So let's just take 2-3 minutes, again, with the people next to you or in a small group. Could you figure out a way where you can find out about people's values, ideas, and where they want to go without using a piece of paper or an email? Okay? No paper, no email. Where do these people want to go as being a part of your volunteer organization, and why do they want to be involved? Everybody get that? Okay, go ahead. Got 2 minutes. So no paper, no email. How do we increase our engagement? How do we get people involved? What do we think?
Have a conversation.
Have a conversation. The lost art of conversation. I think it's lovely. Yeah, we were just talking about phone usage. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess one of the things that we've done in our community is, first of all, we tried to turn the tap up, so we promoted a lot. That way we would have too many apply, and then actually sit down with people, and once they demonstrated that they care enough, find out if they would actually mesh well with your culture.
Sure, okay. Yeah, and presumably you can then define that culture and make it very easy for people to understand. Yeah.
I think another way to get people involved is to promote events or activities that spread by themselves and almost create this self-fulfilling prophecy where people want to get involved because of what they see other people getting involved.
Right. Makes perfect sense. We have that in rugby, right? We see the field, we have this lovely promotional, we have marketing events. We have a whole idea with that. It's fantastic. Please.
I think, obviously there are conversations, but understanding why people want to be involved. If it's the reason, my friend's doing it or because, then they're not going to be able to explain it to other people, and they're probably not going to be that engaged volunteer that people want to be there.
Right.
So, by having conversations and really finding out why people feel compelled to come and be engaged in the community, would be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. The why is huge. Yeah, the why and the how. And those conversations take a while, don't they? Yeah, but they're so worth it in the long run. Absolutely. I do find with some of the paper applications, it's really nice to be able to bounce back and talk to those athletes afterwards. Tell me about that time. I remember you mentioned that. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? Because inevitably, there's not really that much that's on the paper, but there's enough to start a conversation and really get to know a little bit more about those athletes. And a lot of times they've actually been through a little bit more than you think, or that they were able to articulate perhaps as well, because they're still pretty young, right? We've still got 17-year-olds coming in, so.
Do you have assistant coaches that help in the recruiting process?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
This coach, do you mind, that's
yeah.
sort of further vetting and
that's right. So there's three of us. There's 3 of us on staff. Sean Dunlevy and Blake Wilson are our assistant coaches, and Vicky Wilson, who was also part of our team, went off and had a baby, so Blake stepped in. But Leo's our official mascot now. He's pretty cute. And so Sean does the majority of our recruiting piece right now, and I sort of step in when needed. So he's our essentially our first point of contact. So we have information we can send to them, and what we do try to do is meet with athletes. Sean also coaches in the summer, so do I. We get to know, we sort of travel, we go to OFSA, we do some recruiting, we go to the CASE tournament for all the independent schools and try to make connections. And make connections with coaches too, right? Because athletes don't always reach out. We want to look at the people who also are interested in the success of their athletes, i.e. the parents, and they want to see their kids be successful. So we want to make some connections with them as well. And often that's really helpful from my perspective. There's some parents that all of a sudden I've kind of decided maybe I don't really want to work with their kid. That happens, right? And sometimes I think, man, these guys are fantastic. So, I really, really want them involved. So yeah, I'm sure you can all sort of think about that piece. Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question for you. In the recruiting process, do you find that, you can really see someone joining a team or a volunteer, but do you find that the people who come to you or people that you reach out to have a better success rate with actually recruiting? So if we're going after someone and, really pursuing someone, that I'm not sure for us what that looks like.
Everybody wants to be wanted. Yeah. We're human. We crave connection. And why has Facebook and Twitter become so big? It's because it gives us a connection. I wouldn't say it gives us the best connection, but it gives us a connection. But if we, absolutely, engaging in conversations, text messaging is a big thing, right? A lot of the kids aren't on Facebook and Twitter as much as maybe some of the older athletes are. So we'll text message, we'll talk. We certainly do try to. We don't do a lot of home visits. I know that's something that other teams do. Financially, that's a a difficult piece for me. It's not like I can just fly to Calgary and go meet with somebody. Not going to happen. But definitely, the more that we engage and the more that we have conversations, the more people recognize that we're interested. Now, there's a tipping point, right? There becomes a time when that athlete then becomes from low maintenance to high maintenance, right? High maintenance volunteers, not so good, right? The difficult. They might be great people, but they're just such a drain on your time that maybe you need to sort of cut them down in terms of what they're doing so that they can just do it on their own, right? So absolutely, there's a connection, but then the connection needs to be at a certain level, right? And fulfilling for them maybe until they arrive, and then then connecting them with potentially a senior athlete or a senior volunteer. That makes a big difference because you still want to maintain that connection in the first place. Great question. Hi. I've got a couple of other things up here on here that I'll get to. We have testing. I'm not really sure how that fits into a volunteer organization. It's not like we give them a test to say, did you pass it with flying colors? Maybe it's, are you in charge of an event and you've done it really well? Fantastic. But it's not like we're testing to see how high they can jump or how far they can throw a medicine ball. Our girls just did testing last night. Actually, all the varsity teams did. So I'm interested to see all the numbers when they come out later today. We also do a lot of goal setting on a weekly basis, individual goals and team goals. All get set, and I'm assuming most of you have goals to achieve in your context. However, how often do you check in on those goals with the people that you're working with? What do we think? Is that like a year? Is it like when you get here, you check in, and then you come back next year and you check in later? That's scary. That's 365 days. Right? So we probably need to do a check-in a little bit more often, right? It's like getting off a conference call and say, we're having another conference call in a month. Let's make sure our action items actually get done, right? But if we have to do that in a volunteer context as well. So what is it that we want to accomplish in a year? What is it we want to accomplish in 6 months? What is it we want to accomplish in 3 months? What is it we want to accomplish next week? We have to break it down. That's what athletes do, and that's how they're successful. Because they focus on the goals and they go after them every week, every day. They also have to be self-evaluative. Okay, yeah, that goal this week, not going to happen. I got too many assignments. I have to put that on the back burner. I got to be a student, and then I'm going to come back and get back into my athletic pursuits afterwards. Okay. The last piece here is focus on self-development. You can goal set all you want, but we still have to be able to grow. Okay, I often tell the athletes, years ago, I had a mentor who talked to me about a feel-good file. I went, a feel-good file? What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, it's a file folder. I put all the cool stuff that people tell me in that file folder. And then when I'm feeling crappy, I just go back to it and open it up, and I feel like a rock star after that. It's awesome. Okay, so you can do a jar as well, which is helpful. So do you have a feel-good file for your volunteers? Or have you encouraged them to create one? Or will you make it a habit to celebrate their successes and give them something to put in a feel-good file once a day, once a week, once a month?
I think that Alumni Relations is doing an amazing job of recognizing volunteers now. I think that years ago, we had a lot of conversations about how we thank our volunteers and how we recognize them, and they have actively gone after that, not just with the words that they use in talking to people, but also in setting up things like this, which is really a thank you to the volunteers, but also for nominating people for awards and making sure people get opportunities to speak and do the things that are really important to them. And I really applaud the work that Judith and her team have done, because I think they've made a big difference to a lot of people involved with me. So.
Awesome. That's great. Absolutely. It makes a big difference, doesn't it? How many of you have been on the receiving end of one of those thank yous or recognitions? Think about how you felt, if you can do that for somebody else, and how long it might take you to do it to make them feel what you felt. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Doesn't have to be long, right? Pretty big. Amazing what a handwritten card will do these days, right? Okay, makes a big, big difference. I'm just going to skip over a couple of these things here. Oh, I'll share this with you. This is Sean's mantra. If it was easy, everybody would do it, right? If it was easy, everybody would volunteer, but it's not easy, right? I mean, the fact that you're here, you've shown a ton of dedication to be here yourselves, and we have to recognize that. On to roles on team. So in your volunteer context, are the roles clearly defined? Or do you just kind of do whatever needs to get done? Okay? I would encourage you to think about, if you have 2 or 3 key people on your team, what are the roles that they need to play? Where can they be most effective? Okay? In our context, no one can be irreplaceable. Everybody has to be ready to step in. That goes for coaches, that goes for athletes. We have illness, we have injury, we have catastrophic things that happen where we miss an athlete for a week or longer. Or a coach gets sick. I got sick right before our bronze medal game. It's not good. But I knew that even though I was sick, the people that were there to support me, Sean and Blake, I had no problems. I knew that they were going to be in great hands. I could step away, and the athletes would be well cared for. Okay? And the athletes knew, no big deal. Sean and Blake have been around. They know exactly what's going on. It's all good. Okay? Roles of athletes are something that we also talk about. Okay? I'm guessing that many of you have been involved in sport in some way, shape, or form, even if you were small at the time. There's starters, then there's the bench players. We like to call them finishers because they're the people who go on and finish the game for us. And that when you hear the word bench, you think second best. And reality is they're not. They have to be a finisher for us. Okay, so you might have in your own context starters and finishers, okay, and we've also got developers. So we've got people who have big ideas, who create massive opportunities for us by supporting our values through ideas because they're so invested in what they do. Okay? What I'd like you to do is take a couple minutes, maybe 2, think about the people on your team or the people that you need to have that you don't already have that might fill these roles. Who's a starter for you, who's a finisher for you, and who's a developer for you? Questions on that? Go ahead. Okay, that seemed to spark some good discussion. Awesome. I hope that's helpful for you in terms of thinking about roles and defining them. I'm sure some of you have great definitions for roles, but we don't always think about the other people who can be idea generators. Sometimes we take that on ourselves too much. Every once in a while I have a great idea, but man, it's few and far between. It's other people who have great ideas, and I just piggyback on them. In fact, the roles on team, this idea, although he doesn't call them the exact same thing, Phil Jackson, won a few NBA championships. He wrote a great book called Sacred Hoops, and it talks about roles on team. So if you like basketball at all, it's a great read. And it's something that a few years ago we started assigning. Of course, at Queen's we'd do this. We actually assigned books for our athletes to read over the summer. It's the inner geek in me. I do teach English as well as phys ed. So in any case, that was one of the ones we read. And we did have a couple of athletes who really read that and bought into it and embraced their role as a finisher as opposed to thinking that they were second best. And it really did pay off. We were very, very lucky with that. Managing the bench. So managing the people who aren't always starting and the people who are maybe on the periphery in a volunteer context. We have to be honest. Okay? I need you for this. Otherwise, I know that I might not be able to count on you for the next thing. Okay? Be really clear. Focus on the future. What do they want to get out of things? What do you want to get out of things? What is it you need? Define the success with them and make success immediately an option. Not 6 months, next week, tomorrow. What is it that they can do and you can do to define the success together? Okay, and then share the options for pick-me-ups. So I already mentioned the feel-good file, and I have a little brief picture of the feel-good jar that happens in my house. Okay? So you can add in all those things. You could change it to whatever you wanted. You could leave it in your office, whatever it is. And you can put that as a motivational piece for, maybe it's for you. Maybe that it's you that needs it the most, right? Because you have those days where you feel like you can't get anything done, even though you worked your tail off for 16 or 17 hours in the day, okay? Or it's a nice little reward after you've dealt with 500 emails, okay? So something to think about. Feed it. It doesn't have to be a December 31st thing. This is just the year end on excuse me, on my end. The other thing is, most of the time, the accolades stop once you graduate, right? You don't get recognized for being on the dean's list or being an athlete scholar. Once you go on to real life and a real job, you don't get honored very often, do you? Okay? So you got to take that on yourself. You got to do it yourself. The other thing you can do is talk to some other programs and help them help you be successful. One of the reasons why we were able to be successful in the last few years is because we've developed a close partnership with the University of Guelph, the Griffins, and their head coach and staff and athletes actually as well. We don't have to go so far as actually teaming up with people in purple, but you know, there's some good lessons we can take from other places. Okay? So just think about that. Are there other people, if you're in Vancouver, are there other branch reps in Vancouver that you guys can share ideas with? Because you're not going to poach people from U of T in Vancouver, but you can probably piggyback on some of their ideas. Make sense? Why not? Reach out. And you know darn well they're going to be really easy to find because you're pretty easy to find. So just check it out, okay, as an option. Use what they're doing to be successful. Finally, a few things. Last couple minutes here. Fostering community and culture. We've talked a lot about the values piece. We want to create culture from the values. Okay, the values stay consistent over time. The culture might change depending on the people in your organization. So the team culture changes as new people come in and as old people leave. Right? As it should, right? It can't remain the same. Okay? We have different people, so therefore the culture must change a bit. We do that. We have a mission statement, and then we have a motto that changes every year that our athletes develop themselves. And it's kind of nice because then it keeps things a little fresh, right? If you have that same mission statement or that same philosophy, it gets a bit dry after a time, and we live in an updating age. So things that happened 2 years ago are almost old, right? So let's keep things fresh. So think about the motto. What is it that we want to accomplish this year that we can put a motto on? Or at least can be our fallback for when we're thinking about what we're trying to accomplish. Okay? Celebrate success within that, and then create fun events for bonding. The girls last night were having a Miss Universe pageant. Yes, rugby athletes were doing that. And this started a couple years ago, so I just try and stay out of it, but apparently they have a lovely time. So, fun and safe, right? Fun and safe. Created together, the history is really helpful. Here's one of the things that we have in our technical manual every year, the 6 standards of the Queen's Way. These are the things that we come down to. And when we're making decisions as coaches and athletes, we try to make sure that we are doing them with these in mind. Continuous learning or growth has to be the first one. The last one that everything is built on is respect. The other stuff goes in between. Okay? So think about this. Do you have, in your roles that you're defining for your volunteers, do you have some standards that they need to meet up with, or that they need to meet? Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay, continuous learning, union, passion. So you celebrate the success, have some rules, and be respectful of everyone. Here's a couple of examples of our mottos. We bleed tricolor. This was on Tyndall the year that Nixon was getting redone. Never enough. And every year we give a team ball. And the athletes get to vote on who gets the team ball at the end of the year. It's the person who personifies that motto and our team values the most. So it might be, aside from being the best player of the team or the graduating player or something like that, The person who gets the team ball to me is the person who exemplifies QWR. So every week, one of those people are chosen at the beginning of the season. The coaches choose someone, they give them the ball, they write a quote on it, then they choose the next person who's going to get the ball after the next game. And it's not always the person who scored the winning try or set it up or worked the hardest even on the field, but it's what they did during the week, what they did cumulatively in their career, that kind of thing. And we get to celebrate it every week. And it's a big deal. When somebody gets the ball, some people don't get it till their 4th year. Some people don't get it at all. So it's a big deal when you get it. They each get to write a quote, and then the quotes build up around the ball. I only put in one picture, but I did have 4 of them on each side. Okay. We celebrate other successes. 2 of our athletes that won All-Canadians this year. It's pretty rare to have 2 from one team. There's 15 athletes that get selected, and there are 24 programs in the country. So pretty big deal for 2 of our athletes to be selected. It's Jill Pegg on the left and Lauren McEwen on the right. Thankfully, they are both back next year. Yes, it's fantastic. And Nadia Popov was one of our athletes in first year. She's now training at the Center for Excellence in Langford with the national team. This is her in action 2 days ago at Hong Kong Sevens, which the team won. So she's one of our athletes who's heading for 2016 for Rio. So you can follow her on Twitter too. Nadia J. Popov, I believe. A couple weeks ago, we went to Langford and we won the bowl. I really like to point out Sean on the left. He's really interested in the photo op. I don't know where I'm looking, off somewhere else. The girls were more interested in the trophy, so I was happy about that. That was awesome. And a couple examples of having fun. That was in the back of my car, the rugby ball head on the left. Couple of girls running lines, Jordan on the bottom, and then 3 of them after a game. Mel in the middle of the 3. Her dad is a fantastic photographer, and we're so lucky. We have great photos of the girls, especially after the games. But I mean, the in-game shots are great. Other thing you can do too, guys, is a little bit of team bonding. Okay, there's lots of stuff that you can do to have some fun with the people that you are working with, and it doesn't always have to be at a bigger event like this, right? Think about some of the stuff you can do. This was us near Peterborough. On the left, we are smacking each other with pool noodles. Highly recommended. And the other one, we're trying to steal all the tennis balls and put them in our own hula hoop. Yes, it's that basic. It is that easy to have fun with your team. Okay? Definitely some fun stuff there. Okay, so just a couple things to wrap up. Oops. The questions that we asked at the beginning, I hope I've been able to answer them from the QWR context for these particular questions, and I hope that given what we've talked about, you're able to take some of the stuff that we do and put it into your own context. Particularly the consistent dedication over time, because I think that's why you're all here, right? We're trying to engage more people in being volunteers and being activists at Queen's. And that benefits current students, former students, and our incoming students. So I think what you're doing is pretty laudable, and I applaud you for doing it, so thank you for being involved. Last little bit. Here's what I want you to think about. There are a lot of pictures in my presentation, right? Okay. I'm so lucky when I can turn on my cell phone and I can scroll through all the photos and I can see all the cool stuff that's happened and I've particularly been able to be involved in over the last 13, 14 years. Obviously, my cell phone is not quite that old, not the old flip thing. But to be able to scroll through it and see those photos is so powerful. So if you were to look at the photos on your phone or your computer, could you see the things that exemplify your organization? Could you see the values in action? Could you see the opportunities that you've created? Could you see the successes that you're celebrating? And if you can't, that needs to change. Can you do these things? Last thing, photo of our team at CIS. Shameless plug, if you're interested, and you want to see some excellent women's rugby, probably the best you'll ever see outside of international games, here, Nixon Field, November 5th to 8th. It will be cold and probably raining and crappy weather, but we will have great rugby, okay? So please do come out. And thanks to all of you for letting me come and take a bit of your morning, and thanks to Marianne as well.